If your leader can't handle an assessment process, they probably can't handle their job.
Assessment into an organization isn't just about tools, it's about making better decisions, better informed decisions.
We don't know everybody well enough to make that judgment. It's another important lens. The work that we're doing today is most likely not going to be the work that we're doing tomorrow or in a year's time. The secret really for the future will be understanding the candidate experience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rifki Zamzam, and welcome to my podcast. Today's topic is on the Human Capital series, the CHRO's Edge, turning assessment into strategic organizational advantage. I have my guest over here, Amanda White from Talogy. Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Amanda White. I'm the Vice President for Talogy here in the Middle East. Our focus is on talent assessment, leadership development, and all those things pertaining to talent strategy.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So we have a very interesting topic which would add a lot of values to CHROs across the world. I want to go deep into this. So I want to start with the question straight away. So segment one, why is human capital assessment becoming a strategic priority for organizations today?
Well, I will argue that it's always been important, but I think today even more so. I think what we have is we have a kind of a really interesting state of affairs. We've got a lot of pressure on the cost of the business. We've got a lot of change in technology coming through, in particular in the AI sector, as we know. We're expecting, if you will, more from less people. And I think we're expecting also a slightly different skill set than before. And I think it's always been important to assess employees coming in. But I think now that we're making that shift, we are tapping into that different skill sets. We're trying to make data-driven decisions. We're trying to make our processes more effective, quicker. So there's quite a lot of focus on this area at the moment. We are finding more and more organisations are looking to assess talent before they come into the organisation, or indeed as part of their leadership journey, or their promotion, or their succession journey.
Brilliant. Thank you. That actually opens doors. A lot of ideas actually come in, Amanda. So thank you so much for that. Well, segment two, what role does assessment play in strength organizational development strategies or organizational strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it plays a big role. As I said, we're trying to make sure we've got the right people coming in. We're trying to get that culture alignment and that behavioural alignment. We're also trying to get people who are really capable. So we're talking about different assessments. We might use psychometrics, for instance, such as capability assessments. You would have heard of things like verbal, numerical, abstract reasoning. This gives us a real indicator of someone's ability to work with complexity, someone's ability to problem solve, and their critical thinking skills, which I think is particularly important now because, of course, the work that we're doing today is most likely not going to be the work that we're doing tomorrow or in a year's time. So having that critical thinking skills and that learning agility is really important. We're also looking from psychometrics to give us an indication of someone's behavioural preferences, their traits, and their ability to actually fit culturally into the organisation. So again, two elements of psychometrics that are really important. I would then also advocate that we are doing things like interviews and assessment centres to really get some of that first-hand observations and really be able to probe and challenge some of those things that people have reported about themselves. Because I think we need to remember, of course, that a personality psychometric is a self-report measure. What we're doing with an interview is we are able to kind of probe a little bit deeper and say, tell me about a time. What did you learn from that experience? What would you have done differently, etc. So we can really hear what's been going on there. And in a leadership centre, even better, we can actually see them in action. So it's important, I think, to have quite a breadth of assessment really as part of this journey.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. How do you build a compelling business case? Even being in senior HR roles for me, the struggle is to build that business case, to incorporate assessments into talent development programs. I see the advantage in incorporating recruitment. I see the advantage in pre and post training, pre and post hiring, before the promotion, after the promotion. I mean, this is what I put. I'm sure most of the CHROs, they do this. Most of the directors, they do this. But how do we build a compelling business case to convince everybody else on the board?
Yeah, that's really important actually, because I think there
Mm,
is an association with psychometrics and assessment equal cost,
yeah.
rather than advantage. And as you say, what we're trying to do always as CHROs and talent professionals is obviously ensure that we are trying to get people, the right people in, we're trying to keep them for longer, we're going to try and have them to be as productive as possible, and therefore also our processes as efficient as possible. So I think we talk about reduced turnover and our hiring accuracy and reduce attrition. Attrition costs a lot of money, especially at the leadership level, because invariably it takes longer for us to see if a leader is appropriate in role. And by that point, we've not only lost time, but we've lost advantage. Improvement in the hiring process, obviously, we are hopefully getting people who are better fit to our organisation. So we've got to improve quality
Mm,
of hire as well.
yeah.
We've got reduced early stage underperformance, because I think if we've got the right people in, they come in quicker,
Yeah.
they hit the ground quicker. And we can measure those sorts of things by looking at, line manager feedback, performance data.
Mm,
We can really see if we've actually achieved that there. We will likely see an increased productivity and increased revenue contribution from the right person versus the
mm,
person that we shouldn't have really taken on.
yeah.
And therefore, we're going to reduce our replacement costs and obviously our rehiring costs. We've got multiple different pieces as part of our ROI, if you will. But I think if we get it right at the beginning, if we identify the right people at the
Yes.
beginning, we can onboard them quickly with that data that we got from the
Yeah.
recruitment process. We
Yeah.
can identify those development
Yeah.
needs quicker. We can actually put some really personalized
Yeah.
development actions into place.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what we're doing immediately is we're starting to build our leadership pipeline,
Yeah.
because those people coming in early doors are our future
Yeah.
leaders if we play it right. And I think finally, I think there's a lot to be said for scalability, for standardization. When we are hiring, especially for larger organizations, we want a process in place which is
Yeah.
standard and repeatable. We don't have to think twice about
Yeah.
how we're going to assess that individual. We don't have to think twice about which assessment, which norm group, which competency. If we put in those fundamentals at the beginning, we can also leverage from an ROI point of view. We can also leverage having had that standardization, that efficiency in terms of our sort of recruitment process as well.
Amanda, the reason why I'm smiling is I tried that in 2016.
Oh yes,
Had a meeting with one of the C-level members. The first response I got was, "You will scare people away." I
yes.
said, "That's not the purpose. The last thing we want is a C-level coming in or a GM coming in and leaving in 1 year."
Yeah. Do you know what? I think actually, contrary to what you just said,
Yeah,
actually improves candidate experience and certainly a candidate's impression of the organization.
exactly.
They're taking me seriously.
Exactly.
And actually, if we put together the right communication assets at the different touch points in the
Yeah.
assessment process, actually, the research suggests that actually you improve that candidate experience and candidate impression of your organization. You're seen to be more professional. And I
Golden word.
think
We should have done this podcast in 2016. Oh, golden
and I
words.
think yeah, and I think the other thing I would say is that if your leader can't handle an assessment process, they probably can't handle their job. So
Exactly.
put them under pressure. Let's see them perform.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if they can't, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was like, no, there's no reason to be afraid of. It's not a fault finding. It's an assessment to see who we need, what we need, and it's to be based on 5 years ahead, so that we know that we hire someone for the future.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely.
well, that bus has long gone. What are the biggest misconceptions or barriers organizations face when it comes to adopting assessments?
Well, I think you touched on it just now.
Mm,
Value and cost is a
yes.
huge part of this, even though, frankly, most psychometrics would, I would say, fall into hundreds of dirhams or Qatar Rial. They are not thousands. So
Yeah.
actually, psychometrics are actually relatively inexpensive compared to the cost of a poor hire. Even an assessment centre, I would argue, is lower in cost than a poor hire. So I think the cost-based argument we can park to some extent. I think the second piece, which again you and I just touched on, is complexity. People
Mm,
see it as a bit of a barrier because they don't quite understand it, or they think it's complex, or they think actually it's going to protract the hiring
mm,
window, but actually it doesn't if we're organised at the beginning. So I think time and money are um, two barriers. I think the other one, which is the one we hear all the time, is we know our people already. We are good at making those decisions. We've got intuition. So I think there's a lot of people who kind of feel that they don't need an assessment to tell me who anybody
mm,
is. I can see it already, and actually. Clearly, we don't know everybody well enough to make that judgment. It's another important lens. It's not to dismiss the fact that line managers have got a really valuable contribution in giving us that workplace observation. But when you couple that with a psychometric and you bring in, say, a leadership development centre, what you've then got is a really nice 360 of an individual. And you can start
yeah.
saying, yeah, this person's ready now for promotion. This
Yeah.
person's ready now for succession, or this person's going to be at least a year away or 2 years away. What do we need to do to ensure this person gets from here to here? And do they have the capability to get from here to here? And that's the sort of thing that assessments can help us with, obviously, is understanding that
Yeah.
gap and putting the right measures in place to kind of bridge it.
So we're going into segment 5. What does good look like, Amanda? How should organizations embed assessments into their operating model for lasting impact? I know you touched upon this a little bit more, but I believe all the heads of HR who are part of our audience from Japan all the way to South America would want to listen to this one.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of how would you go about implementing assessments, is that really the focus?
Mm,
I would suggest that actually we need to take a step back at the point that we need to actually put into place an assessment process. We start typically as Talogy, we start with a steering group meeting.
yeah.
We want to know how many kind of levels are there in the organization. We want to know what do we anticipate from those people leading self right through to those people leading the organization. What are we looking for at each level of the organization?
Mm,
Here we're probably looking at things like teamwork,
mm,
communication, problem solving at individual contributor level. By the time obviously we get to the top of our organization, we're looking at strategic thinking, commercial acumen, leading others. So we're looking for different things at different levels. We're also going to be comparing them
mm,
against different populations, or what we call norm groups. And then we might want to say to ourselves, for some volume positions, some of our clients like airlines, for instance, we might have, thousands of cabin crew. So let's write a profile for that role, as well as having kind of steps at level. So we've got, if you will, a matrix. We're probably going to want to spend less money at the bottom and more money at the top, where
yeah.
actually there is more impact for a bad
Mm,
hire. As we
yes.
said earlier, leaders make more of a difference, positive or negative, than anybody else. So actually, we are probably going to cut the cloth. We're probably going to have, personality and ability at the lower level, and we're probably going to have an assessment centre potentially at top level. So we're creating a matrix of different assessments to use at different levels for different purposes of the organisation. And we're going to choose, as I say, different competencies, different norm groups, and a different approach. We might also want to put into our kind of assessment policy something around provisions for things like feedback. So if
Mm,
you're successful, we're going to give you a feedback session. At the very least, we're going to give you an individual development report. If you're not successful, perhaps we'll give you an automated report.
Yeah.
Because going back to candidate experience and employee brand, we've also got to make sure that if you are assessed, that you have some form of results. I think it can be, research suggests that it can be quite negative for a candidate to be assessed and never know what their results were. So I think, in this early stages of creating our policy, we need to decide on what are we measuring, how are we going to measure it, what is our feedback process going to look like, how can we leverage all that investment that we've made in finding the right person, taking those assessment results into the onboarding phase, taking
Yes.
them into the graduate development program. Let's make that connection between recruitment and development and succession. It's really important data, and it's important getting that framework ready first. And then, as I said earlier, you've got a faster process, you've got a process less prone to bias, and you've got a process more objectivity, more science, more data, likely got a more robust process, and less room for error.
That's very insightful. You actually got me thinking. I need to stick to the script because a lot of thought started triggering, Amanda. So segment 6, and this is our last segment. Um, Looking ahead, how will assessments evolve in shaping future-ready organizations?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see that already. I think that one of the
Mm,
biggest concerns that organizations have is the propensity for these tests to be run through AI and for individuals to be able to cheat easily. So I think, what we've been investing in as Talogy is AI proctoring, for instance, so that we know who's taking the test. We know that we're more likely to have that candidate true and valid results as opposed to AI completing that assessment for them. So there's
mm,
that piece around the kind of the scrutiny of the assessment itself and the validity of the assessment. I think the other thing is that people's attention span has got shorter. So we have spent quite a bit of time in creating assessment batteries which are slightly shorter and crisper, but also obviously retaining predicted validity, consistency, reliability. And we've spent some money in the last 5 years in gamified assessments as well, just to make it a little bit more interactive, because people are now on screens all the time. They expect to see something
mm.
a lot more polished and a lot more engaging. So again, our focus as Talogy has been on creating more engaging assessments. And then finally, I think as we really have started to embrace AI, and we're looking at things like assessment centers with avatars and AI-driven role plays and case studies and presentations and what have you. So I think for us, it's this really careful balance between keeping it engaging, leveraging the latest technology, and ensuring as psychologists that we've got something that's evidence-based, it's science-backed. We know that it's valid. We've got our chief scientist, of course, we've got our artificial intelligence team, our AI team, looking at ways in which we can really embrace technology at the moment, because I think that will be the secret really for the future, will be understanding the candidate experience as well as getting the results
Yeah.
and the insights that the client wants.
All right. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, to wrap up, so incorporating assessment into an organization isn't just about tools, it's about making better decisions, better informed decisions. When we include assessments into building an organization, taking it forward, we need to create a baseline. We need to create a very strong impact that more focus is on the top as it influences the culture all the way to the bottom. And we spoke about the constraints, we spoke about the impact, and but we definitely spoke about the advantage and the biggest impact to any financial status of an organization, that is how much cost it will save if we get the right people through the right methods. Amanda, I would like to invite you to give your closing as well, because I feel that it is very, very important to all the CHROs.
What I liked about what you've just said there is, how can we use this more broadly? We've talked a lot about hiring right now, but actually there is, as an important, from an organization development point of view, it's really important we also use assessment to support us in development, and promotional selection and succession. I think we are in the Middle East and in Doha, in particular, we've got a lot of organizations maturing. There's a lot of leaders who have been in place for many years who are looking potentially at moving forward. How do we make sure that we've got the leaders of tomorrow? And how do we make sure they're fully equipped? Yes, we can throw them all onto Harvard and INSEAD courses and what have you, but actually we need something that's really personalized in development plans. And assessment gives us that extra level of insight that we need. So when we're doing succession, we're looking at line manager feedback. We're looking at those indicators of potential. They're the ones that give us that discretionary effort. They're the ones I give that complex project to. They're the ones that are my go-to, and others come to them to ask them for help. Those individuals are likely to be our high potentials, and we want to identify them and get them into the nominations process. We then need to kind of assess them to make sure and validate that they're high potential. And then we're going to be using assessments to actually give us those development insights and understand how ready they are to move forward. So from an organisational point of view, to answer your question a bit more concisely, assessments are great, clearly an imperative in the recruitment of hiring of people, but right through the whole journey and right through every level. When it comes to organisation development, they play a role throughout to really give us some really kind of specific insights, and action plans, if you will, can be based on them.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for joining me today on our podcast. It's a very heavy, it's a very strong podcast, and I'm sure our audience, especially the CHROs, will take advantage of this. And I do hope our C-suite, the CEOs, the COOs, the CFOs understand where we are coming from and the reason why we need to get it right to make sure that we have a successful organization for the next 50 to 100 years, if possible. To our audience, thank you very much for listening. We need to know from you how myself and Amanda can help you, what you want to know from us, what you don't want to know from myself and from Talogy. So please subscribe, like, share, comment, and reach out to us on the contacts below and on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much. Have a good day.